privileged white leftists wanted us people of color to speak up, and they wanted us to show our presence. And it's like, well, we're fucking here. If you guys could welcome my guests, Silver Spook and Aliakai.
Aliakai.
Aliakai. I forget the. I keep forgetting one vowel.
Yeah, it comes from the name Aliakai, which means lady dogfish.
I like it. Aliakai. Okay. What are your guys' honest opinion on this idea of Indigenous Peoples Day?
My opinion on it is that it's good to not celebrate a murderous rapist, but at the same time, it's also it feels kind of like you were talking about. It feels a lot like sort of a head nod, like, oh, look, we did a thing, pat ourselves on the back, rather than actually kind of addressing a lot of the major problems that like Indigenous folks face. I mean, there's so much voter suppression going on in like the Midwest and over on the East Coast, like the stuff that happened. I think it was in the Carolinas, like where they started, and the Dakotas, where they started stripping people of their voting rights. Like that kind of stuff, I think, is a lot more pressing than the name of a particular holiday.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, like in terms of like Indigenous Peoples Day, I mean, I don't really have, I'm not, yeah, I kind of would agree with, what's already been said. I'm a native Hawaiian Indigenous person. Is the hashtag Indigenous Peoples? Huh?
I said different colonizers.
Well, American, Japanese, international, colonial, neo-feudal, asshats. I don't, we're left and right. We're gonna have another one. Well, the Chinese will be here soon, I'm sure. It's, destroying the reef, I'm sure. We have a giant telescope they're trying to build on a mountain. It's a $1.4 billion collaboration between Canadian universities. So thanks Trudeau for that. California universities, Japan, co-founder of Intel, $200 million, Gordon Moore, money throwing a giant mega project that's going to like contaminate the water on a mountain. So, and like, I mean, that's to me is like, that's the most important thing for us is, an important thing for us is like, how are the material conditions of the Indigenous people? And I like obviously like vision like for 100% honest, I haven't really looked that much into it. I saw Indigenous Peoples Day trending, and I was like, about that. I don't particularly like Christopher Columbus. I don't think he gets as much. Yeah, I don't think he deserves of a percent of the attention that he gets. But I mean, too much energy on that. I think anyway. So that's kind of my thing. Is I try to. Yeah, that's my thing.
Yeah, I think I would appreciate people like not. This is like one of those things where it's like it's literally give them a holiday and they'll shut up. You know what I'm saying? And bringing it back to like you guys are both saying, like you'd rather see material things actually change, i.e., allowing indigenous people on their tribal lands to have a say in the in the voting process, right? Not making arbitrary laws on, oh, you need an actual mailboxed address in order to vote, like that type of nonsense. The idea that we still have like if you look at like we still have like waste deposits on indigenous lands out west that I know of where like they just like I know like for nuclear waste like they'll put it onto what they would consider uninhabited land, and it's just on the edge of a res, and so then children go and play on basically like this mound of nuclear waste and shit. So it's like these are things that should be addressed first. And like they can be we I mean that's not even like walking and chewing bubble gum. That's like talking and putting the gum in your mouth. Like it's not that fucking difficult to sit there and just to acknowledge that hey, with this gesture we are going to we're going to roll back the voter suppression laws within these states for Indigenous people and declare it Indigenous Peoples Day. Bam. You know what I mean? Like, you're doing something more than just putting a day on a calendar so that people leave you alone. Instead of thinking about things like as like within the framework of industry or this like luxury market capitalism like idea of just, you know, like once again like hoarding and you know, just that everything will be provided for you and all this shit, like that's the type of stuff that you need to get out of your head. And allowing indigenous people to lead this, to take up leadership spots, and as far insofar as paving the way for a leftist revolution, you know, a small R revolution, not a capital R revolution. We're not necessarily talking about bloody violence. However, I am not opposed to that because I understand that it is marginalized groups who have their fucking backs to the wall, when they have no other choice, when literally uh, their entire history of their people and their ancestors have been nothing but oppression, repression, and subjugation. Like, this is, you know, they have every right to get their, you know, their to take back their sovereignty, their individual sovereignty by whatever means necessary that they need to do. I mean, obviously, the Zapatistas forming back during, or the Campesinos and the Indios forming back during the Mexican Revolution, banding together and doing the same and fighting back against, you know, their the hacienda owners, and then, you know, the reprisal of the EZLN taking up the banner of the Zapatistas again and taking over Mexico City and establishing themselves. Like, these are things that happen when your people are pushed into a corner and you can't take it no more. You know what I mean? The phrase of "ya basta," like enough is enough. So I think, you know, when white people or people within these Western countries can say to themselves like, I need to shut the fuck up and I need to listen and I need to learn. Um, oh, dope! River's hosting me. The that they need to shut the fuck up and they need to listen. That holding on to this ideological purity of theory from dead old white dudes from 200 years ago, it might not necessarily be what we need now in order to get our revolution going. Because
Well, especially folks who like see indigenous peoples as these like pure, amazing, you know, like, oh, you're so in like in depth with the land, you're so in contact with it, you're so this, that, and the other. They have this like idealized version of what a Native American is, and it's either an incredibly helpless person or some like spiritual guru, and that's not what we are, and it's also not what we need from you, right?
yeah,
Like, I've had so many people ask me to teach them spirit walking, and it's like, yeah, I've learned it from my family, but that doesn't mean I'm going to pass it on to you. Like, I don't think you realize what you're asking me.
no, it's just like learn. Take a. Why don't you do me a favor first? Why don't you learn how to survive on the land that you live in, and through a fucking winter, and then maybe we can talk. You learn. You wanted to be in this land. You learn how to live within it in a reciprocal way where, you know, you give in what you take out, and you know, because that's basically like, 'cause that's one thing that, you know, like Mexi commented from a book. I can't remember what the book was called, but you know, that's the way that she explained it, where it's just like the original treaties were a thing basically talking about how, you know, it wasn't a way, like the First Nations people didn't, they weren't being like, okay, yeah, we're just gonna go off into this corner and then you can have all the things that are good and that'll sustain you. It was
We were
they,
fucking threatened at gunpoint. We were
yeah,
marched by armies.
Yeah, and any ones that were signed peacefully in the start were initially meant as a thing of just being like, no, we're willing to share this with you, and but you have to do your part by not completely destroying the land and continually make it fruitful for all of us to be for it to be sustainable for everybody. Obviously, they fucking didn't do that because now we're facing what 7 years left on this planet because capitalism has been unchecked, but.
Well, and I mean,
It's
there's also worth looking at the differences in the concept of ownership between a number of indigenous peoples, even indigenous peoples that still survive more or less, unaffected by colonialization, like some of the, colonization, like some of the folks in like places like Brazil that are deep enough in the rainforest that they haven't been fucked with quite as much by colonizers. Like there's a very distinct difference in the way that one sees the world when you grow up in that kind of culture. And so when you start talking about sharing the land, like white people basically heard, it doesn't matter if you're talking about the British or the French or the Spanish, they basically heard, oh, we can have this, oh, you stupid fucking
like here, like this is the
you're
water
giving
we
this
drink
shit
from.
away is what they
Yeah,
heard.
yeah, yeah. This is the clean river that we drink from. Please feel free to take what you want. Oh, you mean I can dam it up? Like no. Can you just like hey no like we need this feeds the animals we hunt. Let's make sure that we can irrigate our crops. Let's make sure that we don't starve to death. Oh, so I
Well, and
can.
that's not to say that no indigenous peoples ever had any concept of ownership, but it was a very different sort of concept. Like there's a number of very different sort of terminologies where even if you start talking about like the older forms of various indigenous languages, because some of them are still living and have evolved, right? Like Cherokee in particular, Lakota, both of them have evolved and grown. Um, like there's a difference in translation even when you start talking about concepts of ownership and land use. So when
Mhm.
you're having two different conversations, even if you have a translator, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Oh, I just wanted to jump real quick and say that if you want to, there's Holly Argent. That's actually my wife. Anyway, but she posted a link to the Puhulu Hulu. It's I know it's hard to pronounce my words, but it's the link that she posted. That's a link to one of the large the the kind of like the hub for the activity that's happening on Maunakea. That you can visit that. And yeah. Anyway, sorry, I just jumped in there.
No,
Double
thanks for that. Yeah, no. It's my channel. I'll do what I want.
On the subject of real life things, by the way, one of the big things that's going on Haida Gwaii right now, there's a big protest going on over a particular grove of cedars just outside of Masset. There's this company, it's like O'Brien and First or something, but they're trying to cut down this like massive grove of old growth cedars, and they're also trying to get an injunction against the protesters to start getting them arrested. But the problem is that particular growth is actually rather sacred. It is where the vast majority of carvers get their logs for poles, like to carve various totem poles, family poles, etc.
So they
So if that
can't.
gets cut down, then our artisans, like going into future generations, may very well not have any logs in order to do their carving. And that decision actually happens tomorrow.
Oh man.
Like
Is
what's going
there?
to happen with that
Do you
grove.
know if there's any? Do you know if there's any like live streams or anything like that? I mean, I'm assuming it's in a courthouse, but I mean, is it a courthouse? Is it a town hall? What is it again? I'm sorry.
I think it's a courthouse. Like there's a Robert Davidson, I think, filed an affidavit in the court. Here it is. I found an article from the Terrace Standard talking about it. Robert Davidson filed an affidavit in BC Supreme Court against O'Brien and First Logging, seeking to halt progression of the logging of a growth of cedar trees that's set to take place. It's actually Thursday, sorry, not Tuesday, that it's going to be handed down.
Okay. Yeah, I love.
But if you guys want to link to that article and you're interested in it, then I can post it. But that's a big thing that's going on, like on
Yeah, please,
the
please do.
islands
I'm
that
gonna.
my people are from.
I'm gonna share all these links on my Twitter. So yeah, yeah, any links because I know that there are some people that just absolutely hate Twitch. So I'm going to kind of post all this for the people that aren't here right now. So.
Well, and for the Haida tribe, there's a really mixed consideration when it comes to logging because a large percentage of the tribe's income and a lot of the jobs on Haida Gwaii are in the logging industry. but there's also a number of groves and areas where there's just so little logging left on the island, and a lot of the groves that are left are sacred. Some of them are still recovering from early logging attempts. Like, there's just it's such a complicated situation because of capitalism, really. Like, tourism is huge on Haida Gwaii also, and like there's less tourists if everything looks like a cut down hellscape. The natural
Yeah.
beauty of the islands is what draws people there.
Oh, yeah, and but remember, there's nothing inherently flawed in the system. Everything's fine. Everything's fine.
Best you can get.
Yeah. What's your guys' suggestions on how to be a proper ally when coming into a marginalized group's space when they are fighting for something?
Ask what we need. That's the big one. Like, the water protectors, one of the big problems they had is shit tons of people just showed up, and there wasn't enough water, there wasn't enough food, there wasn't enough supplies for everybody to go around. They started turning people away because people would show up to help camp out with them, and that's not what they needed. What they needed was money, and they needed supplies. So make sure you contact, folks that are from whatever indigenous movement it is, and ask them what they need from you, and listen to what they say. Don't just show up and expect to be useful.
And for you, Silver Spook, what would you like to see? Like, if people do want to go out to Hawaii, and you covered a little bit of like how do you not just be an exploitative tourist, but how would somebody, if they go out to the island, do good work? How can they be a better ally?
So it's like obviously it's a complicated thing, and there's no ethical consumption or no ethical anything under capitalism, but there's better, when you come to Hawaii, you're flying on an airplane, you're going to fly on a fucking airplane, so you're going to burn an entire year's worth of fossil fuel if you drove a car to work. So, there's no perfect way to do it. So swim to Hawaii. That's what I'm saying.
Swim first.
Take a solar clipper ship like Greta. Whatever you gotta do. Takes 2 weeks, but you can swim with the dolphins on the way. Anyway, that number one. I mean, basically, if you come to Hawaii, like I said, the large hotels and the big tourism packages are all run by massive corporations. Take up steps and look at the corporation that you're going to be giving money when you buy that airplane ticket, or just try to do your best. Obviously, you can't consume perfectly. They have stores. I gotta use electricity. That probably use some fossil fuel to burn it. We do have geothermal, we have solar, but it ain't perfect, right? So do your homework. Like, definitely don't go to Waikiki. That is a giant capitalist Disneyland owned by some rich people in Japan and New York that are sipping champagne while Hawaiians are working all day long doing bastardizations of their sacred dances. Do not go to Waikiki. Do not go to Hanauma Bay. Do not go to the fancy. If you're a millennial or Gen Z, you probably, doing 6 Uber jobs so you can get $360 pay for your insulin. You can't afford to go to Waikiki anyway. But if you're a boomer, definitely don't do that. And you're Gen X, stay with a native Hawaiian. Stay with a local Hawaiian family, and if you can, Airbnb, like somebody who is just a regular family who, is paying way too much money for their $800,000 mortgage, and all of them and their children all working. It will help them out. It ain't perfect, but it will help them out. Like, you know what? We were actually about to be homeless. This is, what your practice is? Give Silver Spook Games fucking money. That's what I wanted to hear. I said, we were going to be fucking homeless in July. We were literally evicted in July.
I remember that.
I'm sorry, Silver Spook. The condemned house that you're living in is no longer going to be a house. A giant Goldman Sachs shell bank is going to be owning it now. So you got to get the fuck out of here, sucker. So that's why I put out the calls. Please buy my game, because all the money that when you buy Neofeed, my video game, all the proceeds go to me and Holly and our 2 kids. We were literally living in the back of a Mazda Tribute. I was eating Skippy peanut butter for dinner every night out of a spoon. They were eating ramen with some vegetables mixed in, so they're not just eating pure, terrible salt. And the practice was, give me some fucking money so we can have a house to live in Hawaii and not be homeless again. Of Hawaiians.
So go ahead.
And the ones that
Yeah, there it is. Good, good. I was about to say,
Anyway,
I was about to tell Holly to go ahead and throw that link up in the chat. So yeah, I guess not necessarily, and yeah, I mean, it's one thing that seems to be the trend is as far as like being a good ally when you're coming when you're showing up to these causes in real life is shut the fuck up and listen to the people that are there. Like the work that the all the work that's been done pre rally, like getting like all the work, all the prep that's been involved with getting those people in the streets. You showing up there just randomly, you're not the savior. You're not the white knight. You're not anything. You're a comrade. And so when you get there, ask how to help. A lot of the time, it's just going there and being like, oh, you need me to help hand out signs, and then like you just hand out picket signs to people. You know what I'm saying? Just shit like that. Or like it is like they said, like today's first time where on Unidos where I think anybody has actually asked for like direct donations. So, and I'm not just talking about Silver Spook either. I'm talking about when Ali brought up the fact of like people needed resources. Not necessarily bodies. They needed
the water protectors specifically.
Yeah, they needed resources, not just another not another set of hands. So sometimes just paying attention and just going out and getting food. I know that like right now with the coal miner protest that's going on, people like sending those people food, sending the people that are camped out on the train tracks supplies is necessary. So it's not even necessarily that they need more people there; they need supplies. And the weather's getting colder now too. So I think these are all things that aren't thought about when people think about doing direct real life action, because they feel like they can go there and that's going to be enough. And
what makes you feel
struggle
good isn't necessarily what's going to have the most impact.
Exactly. So so I guess the constant thing is just be cognizant of why you're there. You're there to help, and supporting. Get rid of that savior complex.
Yeah, and
the
I just want to say,
focus
like,
is not on you. I was just going to say the focus is not on you.
Yeah, and my thing, I think like I did watch that Mexican video where he's talking about we need to let the white people need to sit down and let the indigenous people lead and try to follow their example. And she's like, I'm totally disconnected with nature. I live in an air conditioner house and I buy all my food from a corporation and and it's like and I do think there's something to that. On the other hand, I do think there's something that you can also fall into the the noble savage Rousseau-esque kind of like we're going to go back to the. And obviously we do need to support indigenous peoples everywhere that they are, particularly the Amazon in North America, Central America, South America, across the planet, in Hawaii and all of Polynesia, everywhere. But also I think that there is something else that can be done. And my biggest thing is like I am an indigenous anarcho. I don't have to go call myself a labor. I'm just a native Hawaiian. They are anarcho-socialists.
I don't get. You got nothing to prove, man. We don't give a shit about titles here. This isn't. I didn't know. Nobody's required to take a fucking test before you show up on stream. It's like, do you have a cause to fight for?
The first paragraph of Kropotkin?
No. I don't give a shit.
Well, and I wanted to jump in really quick on the noble savage thing. Like, a lot of that comes from the fact that our cultures were basically killed off, right? We were genocided. So what is left of a lot of the native cultures has been frozen in time because we were not allowed to evolve. We were taken over.
Yeah, and just to try to finish without throwing out another 7 tangents, but basically, the Hawaiians you're never gonna know this because global imperial capitalism, but King Kalakaua, which was one of the he was in the late 19th century. He was the Merry Monarch. The Hawaiian Iolani Palace. We actually had a palace. It's the only palace in the United States is actually in Hawaii. And they actually had electric lights before the United States White House. So the Hawaiians were actually more technologically advanced than the Americans at one point in time. They actually had the literacy rate in Hawaii in the 1800s it was either equal to or surpassing the British. They had a higher literacy rate than America. The Hawaiians, King Kalakaua actually had plans for a submarine 50 years before they ever had submarines. He had met with Edison and all these. So he was trying to build. They were technologically. They were indigenous. They had hula. He brought the hula back. They call him the Merry Monarch because he brought the hula. So could see the future, and he knew that like we can't just go. We can't all just go back and only be in the grass hut and do and in the grass shack and have charge. Because, well, for one, we have global capitalism, imperialism that's going to come for us, and it's coming for us. And also, there's another way to be in the world that is indigenous, but also technologically advanced, but not technologically advanced in an exploitative, Euro-American capitalistic, self-destructive way. And I think that as an indigenous science fiction creator, I also think that that's something that we also have to be careful of, not letting them box us in, because that's what they want to do. They go, oh, well, you Hawaiians on Maunakea, unless you're wearing your grass skirt and you're doing exactly what you did 200 years ago, you don't count as a cultural practice. And that's something that actually we talk about on at Pu'uhuluhulu, the protest. They're talking about, no, don't let them box you into defining. Let the colonizer and the white man define what it is to be an indigenous person. And I think that's really important. And so I don't think yes, we need to do everything that we should do. But I don't think that we just, Mexi was kind of, I don't think she's implying this, but I think you could take from that. We just, if all the Torontoan, Canadian white people just go into the jungle and live on live like how the freaking native people are living like how they lived 200 years ago.
Yeah, I don't
use the solar panels.
I don't necessarily agree with that either. I like to think of how more traditional indigenous people in Central and South America who have kind of integrated themselves into the system that's in place with the world, and where that's they live both in tandem with the land that they sustain themselves on, right? They can go out and they know what plants are edible. They know when how to survive off the land. Basically, they know where they can get their medicine from. Just there. But then they understand that if they need modern technology for stuff, they will go ahead and they will do that. I mean, once again, a lot of my stuff that I've personally been researching has been within the EZLN territory, and the indigenous people there, one of the rights that they want is they want access to modern medical care. They want they demand electricity and internet access. They want these things, but they don't want it at the cost of destroying what they need to survive, right? And it's because of that idea that the people who have been oppressing them for so long obviously aren't going to make sure that they live, right? So they still have the mentality of providing for themselves, but also understanding that they need to get with the times. And that shit is going on once again today. And while northern tribes, north of the Rio Grande, have been, for the most part, completely wiped out culturally, as well as wiped out as well as having their complete, their lineage wiped out entirely. There are other indigenous tribes in the Americas that have had that opportunity to grow and expand, integrate into a modern framework, if you will.
This idea that technology and indigenous folk are completely they're incompatible or separate is a colonialist idea. That flat out is a colonialist idea. Indigenous people are too stupid to deal with technology. This is one of the ways in which we've been demonized, right?
Oh, yeah.
This idea that we're that it's that we can't make any use of it, right? Native Americans very quickly started picking up guns and firing and such, very, very quickly in a lot of the wars. There were heavy bloody battles because we're still people, right? Humans are inventive. We figure shit out. Like there's
Like,
nothing to say that if the colonists had actually approached native peoples differently, that there could have been a much different outcome.
yeah, I honestly, like, it's still to this day, right? Because I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with what's going on in Ecuador right now, but for the last 2 years, there's been an indigenous-led movement against the neoliberal austerity measures that have been put in place by the new president. Okay, and it's all come to a head most recently, where the people, where the poor people and the indigenous people are now working together, and they've gotten their president kicked out of the capital, so he had to relocate. He's still in power, but they got him to move. So they're that's a big fucking deal. You know what I'm saying? It's, imagine
Well,
if,
I mean, if
you
there
know,
are enough angry bodies running at you, you're gonna leave.
yeah, exactly. And so there's a lot of stuff. But here's the thing. Here's my point. They still don't believe that the indigenous people were smart enough or coordinated enough to do this on their own.
Oh my fucking god!
And it's like, and then they tried blaming. They tried.
They're still saying that?
Yeah, they're still saying that. Like they're trying to blame it on Maduro in Venezuela. They're trying to blame it on fuck, I forgot what other. It's all these other countries. It's all these countries that they're saying that it's them that organized this coup, quote unquote, and like all this shit, and it's them that antagonizing it. And it was the same and that same mentality happened back in 1994 when the EZLN marched into, like, was able to band together and march into Mexico City, was because the PRI, the government in Mexico that was in power for 70 years, didn't believe that what their sources were telling them, when they were like, hey, the Indios and the Campesinos are banding together, and they're going to attack us. And they were like, they're not smart enough for that. They're not smart enough to coordinate that. And like,
that's back to the stupid savages, like,
and
fucking stereotype
and like
again.
that,
Like they don't
and
believe we're capable of anything.
and that's my point. Is it's just like, it's still there. So like, you talking about how like people are just like, oh, they can't handle this technology or whatever, or they're not, we don't want to take away their nature, their touch with nature, or whatever the fuck dumbass
The
reasoning.
noble savage.
Yeah,
Magical
yeah.
forest elves,
Yeah, the fucking like everyone just imagines like, it's like Avatar, you guys just like tie your braids into the trees and shit. Like, it's like,
yeah,
it's
that's how we talk Hawaiian. You should tie your electrical needle braid in the tree.
and to me, like, it's just like, it's like it kind of, when your oppressors don't think a whole hell of a lot of you, it does make it easier to come up out of nowhere and revolt against them, because like all of a sudden they're like, whoa, wait, hold, like their monocles drop, you know what I mean? Like
they think we're sufficiently beaten dogs at this point. Like that's what they really think. They think that they have like ensnared and beaten us down to the point where we don't fucking function anymore.
So once again, I don't like, as much as I feel like, we're like letting margin, and I still say this is important, and I said this on non-compete stream, I think when I first got on there, where I was like, privileged white leftists wanted us people of color to speak up, and they wanted us to show our presence, and it's like, well, we're fucking here.
We've been talking.
We've been talking, and now we're here. Now we're here, and now we're going to talk. And either you're going to be our ally and stand shoulder to shoulder with us, or you got to get the fuck out of the way and let us push forward, because we're running out of time. We're running out, like, we are literally running out of time to sit here and focus on ideological purity testing, to focus on the backbiting, to sit here and worry about the comedic takes on right-wing reactionaries on the internet or whatever. There are ways that we can use this technology that we have right now to unite the people. And right now, I want to use the ignorance that these boomers in power have, where they think that Twitch, that YouTube cannot be in any sort of a revolutionary tool. And so, if
Like,
you privileged white content creators out there, if you think that you're too high and mighty, or that your dead old white dude's text holds up to the point where you can still tell us to be quiet and to not, take charge, step aside, please. Don't get in our way.
Not only that, but like indigenous voices, like earlier when Spook was talking about like, oh, well, Hawaiian culture is anarchist, it is socialist, we just don't fucking call it that because that's not the way that you think about it. Like, you get that in a lot of different indigenous groups, not all of them, like a lot of them do still have some variation on hierarchy, but a lot of us aren't even considered when we talk about ideology. Like, a lot of people don't even consider the way that these other groups, outside of the dead old white thinkers who have written all these dusty tomes, like places when people say socialism has never functioned in all of history, like they ignore indigenous peoples completely. Like they're just like, oh, socialism has never functioned in a country with people who look like the ones that are currently sitting on the presidency right now.
It was functioning all over the place, and you white people had to screw it up. God.
Yeah, you all fucking came in here with guns and stopped it from happening, which is what happens anytime socialism takes root anywhere. Y'all were just like, no, here, this gunpowder say it don't work no more. That's what white people fucking did.
So
it's like literally, like, yeah.
No, go ahead.
Becoming socialist. That's how you know the U.S. is going to blow that country up next. Exactly
no, that's 100% correct. That is 100%.
Oh, it's bomb time. Oh, what's that? North African country? Bomb time.
Yeah.
Cuba. Look what fucking happened in Cuba, right?
I like Christopher Savo sent me a video the other day of this reminds me. I'm glad I remembered. I have a note in my phone. I gotta reset it. Okay, so there is a militant group of POC counter protesters that will show up to stand like fully armed, like open carried assault rifles, like some Black Panther shit, like from back in the day. And he sent me a video about how, like, to protest the Joshua. What's it called? What's his name? Fuck. Chat, can you help me, Joshua? The dude who supposedly got shot over selling pot from people who went to go buy it from 400 miles away. Are you guys familiar with this? Do you guys know like about this or whatever? Have you heard about it at all? But whatever. Are you talking
about the guy who got shot, who was like the key witness in that one cop shooting case?
Yes.
Oh yeah.
So
he was like the key witness that kind of proved that the police officer, I want to say it was in Houston, absolutely did actually try to leave the scene, that there was no actual resistance on the part of the person who got shot, that he didn't even get up.
Yeah, exactly. So Josh, I almost had his last name, but whatever.
Give me a second, I'll find it really quick. We actually covered this on a stream the other day on the Raging Atheist channel. We were talking about this when we talked about trans panic, and we talked about racial issues as a part of that stream. So
whatever. So in protest, this militant group surrounded the Texas police station. Like, I should say surrounded. They lined up on the city block in front of it. They didn't completely surround it, but they lined up in front of it, all like with rifles slung over their backs. And I'm just like, holy shit. That's the type of shit that we need to see more of. People
Joshua Brown.
Joshua Brown, thank you.
He was the witness in the Amber Geiger trial.
Yeah.
The one where she got 10 years for murdering an African American man in cold fucking blood when she walked into his apartment.
Yep. Because she said that she thought it was her apartment or whatever. But yeah, so they so in protest against the police of that police department that she was a part of, or whatever. Like I said, this militant group went out, stood out in front in a massive line, and with rifles slung over their shoulders. And this same militant group would counter protest against like white nationalist groups going and standing armed in front of mosques. Uh, so like they would show up in defense of the mosque, and I'm like, this is the type of shit that we need to see more of, because leftists predominantly are seen as, you know, there's no there's really no threat. Like the threat is, and I'm not saying, once again, I'm not calling to burn the motherfucker down or anything like that. But I mean, just making it aware that as emboldened as the Proud Boys are, or these people who like want to march armed into a pride parade in Detroit, you know what I mean, with a police escort or whatever, there needs, like, people of color, marginalized groups need to be able to feel comfortable um, to have that same vigor. You know what I mean? Being able to have that confidence to also, you know, stand. And I mean, I know it can be dangerous, obviously, being a person of color going out, you know, with a gun or whatever. But I think, like, if you are just observing your right, if you live in an open carry state and you guys band together, you should be able to do so. If these Proud Boys are able to do so, you should be able to do so.
I didn't know we had a king. I thought we were an autonomous collective.
When people say socialism has never functioned in all of history, like, they ignore indigenous peoples completely. Like, they're just like, oh, socialism has never functioned in a country with people who look like the ones that are currently sitting on the presidency right now.
It was functioning all over the place, and you white people have to screw it up. God.
Yeah, you all fucking came in here with guns and stopped it from happening, which is what happens anytime socialism takes root anywhere. Y'all were just like, no, here, this gunpowder say it don't work no more. That's what white people fucking did.